Thanks for joining us, Dr. Reimer.
Good to be here.
Describe for us that sense of community among that early group of staff. How did teamwork and collaboration shape that early culture here?
It was very critical for us to all have strong camaraderie and collegiality. Many of you may know that there were right about 30 of us at that time with no residents and very little support. So we affectionately called ourselves the Dirty 30, and that stuck for the next 35 years, actually. So many of us had recently finished training at Mayo Clinic Rochester. So it was not only beginning a career, but also being in a totally new place, totally new building. The 4-story Davis building was all we had, with some trailers adjacent to it on this beautiful 200-acre property that the Davis family had gifted us. So at that point, with so few docs, we had to rely on each other. So it was very strong collegiality, camaraderie. In fact, I memorized all the pager numbers for all the staff.
Oh, wow.
Because in the ER, you need to call people. So Mayo, as many people know, is a very unique, integrated model of care where you have specialists in every area and you rely upon each other. And for patients, it means a lot that they see you pick the phone up and call another specialist while they're there, and really, truly create a synergy among specialists to give them the best care. We were at that time out of that 4-story Davis building, but we commute back and forth up J. Turner Butler to St. Luke's, which is now St. Vincent's, for many years, for 22 years. Used to be a toll booth there, so when you were rushing to the emergency room, it was inconvenient to stop at the toll booth. But that's part of our history, and it was just a very fantastic opportunity to be in on the ground level, boots on the ground, all working together. But in addition, at the hospital, we worked side by side with a lot of community doctors since we were small and we were sharing the hospital. So many welcomed us. Some welcomed us less than others, but we had to work together, and many times go into an operation in surgery with non-Mayo colleagues. So for me, that was not a challenge, but an opportunity, like to meet new people, to network, and just get into the community and know people, and always focusing on what was best for the patient. And one last comment on the very early years. Literally for the first decade, from 1986 to 1996, my fantastic partner Bob Warren and I were on call without residents every other week for those 10 years.
Wow, every other week.
Yeah, so it was, for those in the medical world, like a very long chief residency. But then the light came at the end of the tunnel and just continued growing, and everything was a very... it was challenging, but an opportunity to really work together.
You've talked about it a little bit already, Dr. Reimer. What was your favorite aspect of working at Mayo Clinic? Are there any certain achievements that stand out for you?
Absolutely. I think most of the docs that were here among the Dirty 30 were docs that had trained in Rochester. So that was a very special fraternity, sorority, brotherhood, because we had that kind of in our blood, and we knew a lot about the values and the mission and the vision of the Mayo brothers, 150 years before that. So we were trying to continue that mission and vision in our patient care. I think, in terms of the neurosurgical perspective, one of the very exciting advances was only several years after we opened. The first patient we saw was October 3rd of 1986. And in 1991, so just less than 5 years later, April 1991, we brought to St. Luke's a very high-tech, advanced, stereotactic neurosurgical device that had been designed and worked on while my partner and I were in Rochester as residents. But we brought it to this area, which is the first of its kind. more importantly, besides the great technology, is it gave us a tool to help a lot of people with undiagnosed lesions in their brain, whether they be primary or metastatic. So that was truly a great milestone that we partook in, and helped patients a great deal. Another milestone came 22 years after we opened, and that was the entering into our new Mayo Hospital here on campus, which was a giant step forward for so many reasons, and a very memorable time where all patients from the ICU and the non-critical floors were transported in a long succession of ambulances down J. Turner Butler from St. Luke's 8 miles down the road to the new Mayo Hospital. And it went without any problem. It was just smooth as could be. I think a real testament to coordination of forces and doctors and administrators, CEOs planning it out extremely well. So that was one neurosurgical great advance, one advance for the whole clinic. The next great advance that we're very proud of is that on the first attempt, or first submission, we successfully began a neurosurgical residency, and that was just a phenomenal advance for us in 2012. And from those dirty 30 years ago, now we have remarkable growth in the clinic, as you're aware of, in every specialty, with lots of residency training, fellowship programs, and one of the three shields is education. Another is research, patient care. So the three shields are extremely well represented here and ongoing. We were excited in the 80s to see one crane on campus, knowing that there might be more growth. Now there's 9 cranes, I think. So it's very exciting. Truly a destination medical center, not for only the Southeast, but the world.
Dr. Reimer, since then you've retired, but now you have been reactivated, right, to become involved with the Oral History Project. What inspires you to capture these stories?
That's a great question. And in regard to the retirement, I've replaced the T with a W. I consider myself rewired now in a new frame of mind. But I think as I learned so much from reading and hearing about the Mayo brothers and the history in Rochester, I thought many co-workers felt it was very important for us to record some of the early experiences here in Mayo Jacksonville as we continue to grow. And I think it is important to add one other comment, that when several of us were asked to come here, we were recommended to have a plan B or a backup plan, because it wasn't certain in the 1980s if this would succeed. And as you know, it's just exploded into a phenomenal center. So that was an interesting recommendation for us. So as much as I learned from being a resident and living in Rochester, and going to the Plummer building where there's phenomenal archives of history and surgical equipment and experiences of physicians there, we felt as a group that it would be very important for us to similarly record the history here, so people can look back on that and understand where we were, how we accomplished the growth, and look at the exponential trajectory. But also, when you're smaller, that whole concept of camaraderie, working as an integrated team, it's always critical, but it becomes more critical when you're such a small force. It's like a military unit that has to cover a lot of ground. So that led us to understand the importance of mutual respect, camaraderie, really reaching out to your colleagues, always trying to think in a complex case, what else could this be? That's one of the things I loved about Mayo, is like you don't stop until you dig deep in a challenging case if you don't get a quick answer. Also, again, part of the Mayo values, the mission, the PEARLS is one of the acronyms that's used a lot. I won't go through them all, but partnership, and empathy. The E is empathy, which is an incredibly important part of life and medical care. And I think you see a lot of that among the staff at Mayo, or the people that I work with, particularly early on. Other things that I think are important to convey to residents and to those that are looking back at our history is to really exercise humility, where you're always open for new opportunities to learn and help patients.
Dr. Reimer, what is your advice to young physicians who are just now starting their careers, especially as they may try to connect with Mayo Clinic history?
Another great question. The first thing that comes to mind is mentorship. And, we grow, before we even go to medical school, we have mentors in life, often our parents and other people that enter our life and influence us. So having medical or surgical mentors is very important, but then taking that forward to help train residents below you or have mentees yourself that you pass along information to. And what I see is it's a two-way street where we can learn a lot from our residents, we can learn a lot from our patients. So that is, in essence, being humble enough to recognize you don't know everything. You need to continue to learn, but sometimes the learning comes from listening carefully to a patient's experience, their family's experience, or a resident in training. So intuition is part of the art of medicine, but with that, very, very cautious listening to patients and families will often give you important clues if you don't jump to a conclusion and you keep delving into their details of their history. I would suggest also for anybody, not just in medical training, but years back Ken Burns did a remarkable documentary on Mayo, which, having been a Mayo physician, it was very powerful to watch, but everyone that watched it was touched by it. And it goes through the history in great detail, and the title of it is Mayo Clinic: Faith, Hope, and Science. So those three things are really kind of integral when you think about patient care. They all play an important role, and I'm curious as to how they sequence that, as science being last, faith being first. But regardless, it's like three legs of a stool that all equally need to support and make things in good balance to help patients.
Good advice, Dr. Reimer. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for being part of this Heritage Highlight.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.